We're back here on MLB Now, and the Red Sox have been busy. They're always a fascinating watch. Their trade of Andrew Benintendi, the most notable move they've made. Jackie Bradley is a free agent, so he's still out there. Dustin Pedroia retiring, had to expect that. But at the same time, they brought in some interesting players, including Kike Hernandez, Hunter Renfroe, made a trade for Adam Ottavino of the Yankees. So, yeah, I was going to try to sum it up, but we have Dan Plesac and Dan O'Dowd here. What is Chaim Bloom doing exactly? Because, yeah, I mean, there's big subtractions, and they're retrenching, yet they are adding at the same time, Dan.
Yeah, to me, I still feel like they're in a 2-year transition window. I think they're number 2 right now in the game in CBT tax, right behind the Dodgers. So they're still digging themselves out a little bit from a payroll standpoint. 2023 guys, their payroll commitments go down into the high 30s. So I think this is a transition moment for them. They're trying to add as much versatile players to be as competitive as they can without making any long-term decision that gets in the way of all the prospects they have coming, that then creates this window of opportunity for them in 2023.
I was surprised they moved Benintendi to the Kansas City Royals. I always looked at him as, now 2020 wasn't a good year, but it's hard to grade. There were a lot of what I thought good players that had disappointing seasons in 2020. But I look at the Red Sox, and maybe this is their window when realistically they're looking at it, and they're looking at what their starting rotation was last year, decimated by injuries, and COVID certainly didn't help. And there was no way that they could compete in that American League East with that starting rotation that they threw out there. Now, I look at that rotation now. There are a lot of questions, and a lot of them are health related, but I do give the Red Sox credit in this, Dan. When you look at the division right now, the Yankees and it looks like the Blue Jays on paper are far superior right now than the Red Sox are at this point. So maybe it's time to shift and go in a different direction and look towards 2022, 2023.
Well, yeah, I think they are, but but in that market, you can't stink too far, right?
Correct.
That's kind of, it's like making the trade to Ottavino is like, no, we still have to roll a team out there. We want to be pretty good.
Yeah, and it puts too much pressure on your rebuild to be good again in 2023. And for me, they want to bring the Casas kid at first base. They want Jeter Downs playing second base, Duran or Jimenez in center field. Those are their best young players coming along, but they're going to be kids when they get there. And so it's important they try to stay competitive, but I know where they're trying to get to, and it's those little painful steps to get there that sometimes is hard.
Here's the surprising thing. When we were talking earlier in the day, and I hadn't really given this a lot of thought, the Red Sox, who, look, again, you mentioned they're not going to be quite the Blue Jays. That's not counting, how about the Rays, the defending league champions, and the Yankees, still a monstrous unit there. So you're in the cellar, and yet where are they in payroll? Even though they're retrenching, they're 6th.
They're 6th overall, but in the tax, is really what clubs now look at. They're number 2. And so they're still in that box where how aggressive can you actually be when you really don't have any of the supporting cast around them? BK, look at their everyday lineup, and they've got 2 4-WAR players from me in Bogarts and Devers. We don't know what Verdugo's going to be yet. It may be that kind of player. It may not be that kind of player. They don't have enough horses to actually run with the big boys at this point in time. And yet there's a way and a window for them to be very competitive over the next 2 years.
That's rough. I mean, yeah, because it's like what Andrew Friedman, he went from the Rays, like Chaim Bloom went from the Rays to the Red Sox, and Andrew Friedman went to the Dodgers, and it was like, hey, you get to spend all this money. He was like, no, that money's been spent.
Correct.
I don't get to spend for 5 or 6 years. How would you view it? Would you be, if you were running things in Boston, would you be afraid of not being good enough? Because that's kind of the message from ownership, is like, never say rebuilding. We can't be rebuilding. When sometimes, Dan, you got to rebuild.
Listen, there have been some crazy, unfortunate things that have happened due to COVID. But I do think that COVID has kind of helped, the fan base looking at the 2020 season, and it's going to be a wacky, different 2021 baseball season because of COVID. And I think the Red Sox are getting a little bit of a reprieve because of that. But I do know this. What happened with the Chicago Cubs when they went through that rebuild? It's going to be difficult if you start to see empty seats at Fenway on those day games on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. And until, you start seeing those fannies that are in those seats, you start seeing more empty seats, then I think it becomes a reality. But I think even the best of Red Sox fans right now, reality looks at it and says, we're probably right now number 4 on the poll in the AL East.
No, but I think a fan base, especially one in Boston, they're sophisticated to know where they're at, right?
Right.
I don't think it would be this rebellion of how come we stink. It's like, no, we understand. Like everybody, even the Yankees pulled it off beautifully, not dipping down too far in their rebuild. They only went to the wild card, and then which was some trick by Brian Cashman.
And I do think the Red Sox are going to be way better than they were a year ago.
Okay.
So.